Realized, looking at the website today, that I repeated myself with Boss of the Sock. I didn't notice it. So I never did the fourth section of Boss of the Sock. I did the second section twice, apparently. So I guess if there's not too many questions, I may do that later. I don't know. But I want to show you these ATT projects that are coming up. These are really very easy. And this is very important. But I do need to explain a few caveats. So the ATT projects are here. And the first two are due next week, although I don't think we're enforcing due dates very strictly this semester. But anyway, the important thing to be aware is these are in version 9. I wrote them a couple of years ago. And this thing, they update it a lot. So the version I'm using is pretty far behind now. They're now up to version 14 or something. Anyway, but there's nothing really wrong with learning the old thing, because when I first came across this for like version 4 or 5, and there was like 150 techniques used by bad guys to hack your network, and I said, my students should make sure they know all those techniques. You should be familiar with these terms. You should not freak out. And that's the point of this. You just get to practice looking things up, learning some of these terms. These are all the techniques, build an image, deobfuscate, decode information, deploy containers, domain policy modification. I'm not quite sure what execution guardrails is, but these are things, you should be familiar with these techniques. These are all the things people use to attack and defend systems, and you should get familiar with these. This looks overwhelmingly complicated. When I first saw it, I thought this is insane, but I've come to love it. This is the way it really is. So I wrote these projects where you get practice with it. Although you're practicing with an older version, just be aware of that. So all you got to do, these are like the binary games in other classes. You just have to answer 5 in a row right. So here, what tactic uses this technique, gatekeeper bypass? You just have to search for this. Now, the way this works, there are tactics and techniques. Now, I think, let's look at the enterprise tactics. Yeah, there's only like 14 tactics. And these are what they used to call the steps. In an earlier version of this from a military contractor, Lockheed Martin, made something called the kill chain. And there have been other attempts to like organize hacking. And this is the most modern, most up-to-date system to try to organize what hackers do. They do reconnaissance. They gain information about your target. Then they develop resources. They prepare to attack the target by developing like malware strains or virtual servers they can use, things. Then they get initial access. They manage to get some kind of control over some part of your network. Then they gain the ability to execute code somewhere on the network. So they find enough email addresses or phone numbers or something so they can send SMS messages or emails into the system, and then they get somebody to click on it and run something. Now they have some ability to execute code. And the next question is persistence. They want to make sure that they can retain that controlled. That's why I mentioned in that lecture, when you find something that automatically restarts, that's something to investigate. Because this is the next step. They want to make sure that even when they restart their machine tomorrow, I will still have the ability to control it. Then they want to escalate privileges, because typically you get somebody to click on a link, you get non-administrator rights over an end device, like somebody's laptop, not an important machine and not much power. So then you want to escalate your privileges up to local administrator, and then you want to avoid their defenses, such as like antivirus or whatever. You want to steal credentials as much as possible. You steal hashes from the registry of other systems, and then you want to scan the network to find out what's there to take. And then you want to move across the network. You move from the laptop to a server like a file server, and then you move from a file server to something else like a firewall, and then you try to get to something really valuable like a domain controller so you can get all the credentials, and then you get to the stuff that has what you came for, which might be where the credit card numbers are stolen or whatever you came to do. You have your goals in your attack. Some people attack just to steal something fast and leave. Those are the low-level attackers. Some people want to completely destroy the system because they're basically military activity and they're wiping out everything. And then, like I mentioned, there's the Chinese, which are famous for just quietly putting monitoring stuff on there and doing nothing. They just want to have a persistent presence in your network so they can see what you're doing and steal stuff, like intellectual property. That's been the main thing. Their official goals are now stealing your documents, your drawings, but now they're just there. They just maintain permanent persistence, just like an underground agent, like a double agent. They take a spy into your company, and then don't do anything. Don't do any harm. Just wait there for orders. And then someday we will order you to do something. But until then, just be a good employee and make them trust you. Anyway, you have different goals. You move through the network. Then you collect whatever you came here to collect, credit card numbers, passwords, PDF files, intellectual property. You have the ability to remote control machines with command and control servers on the outside, and you develop a way to exfiltrate data, some way to sneak data out from the inside, and they impact whatever it may be. And of course, not every attacker does all these things, but they typically do some of these. These are the general stages you'll find in attacks. So these are the tactics. And then each one of these has techniques that are used to do it. There are many more techniques than tactics. There were originally like 12 of these, now there's like 14. But so the techniques, you can find them here, and we're only doing the enterprise version. And there's just a lot of techniques. See, 185 techniques and 367 sub-techniques. And this goes up with every version. But still, you should be familiar with most of these. So that's right. So on the question here was, what tactic uses the technique gatekeeper bypass? So what you do, get to techniques, and then just do Control F and search for like gatekeeper. There are 3 instances of gatekeeper. So here's the technique, gatekeeper bypass. I think the first one's going to work. This is called T1553. And the question was, what tactic uses this technique? And so this is this one. And if you click it, it will tell you this is part of defense evasion. So that's going to be the answer here. That's what that is. Gatekeeper is Macintosh's system that prevents you from being able to run files you've downloaded from the internet. And there are a series of bypasses. Windows has a very similar thing, and there have been bypasses to that. So gatekeeper bypass means you're able to run something without having to approve it. And so that's a defense evasion. So that should be, there it is. So that's right. So when you get 5 in a row right, you'll find a flag. And the first bunch of these are all the same. Then you just have techniques for tactics of various types in more detail. And then there's groups and navigator I'll talk about later. These are fun. But I just wanted to get you started on that stuff. Now, the other thing I should probably do, well, let me just stop this recording.